All right, hopefully that flash drive is making its way around. The plan is today we're going to go over Chapter 16 right now, and after the break, however long it takes, then we're going to do the exercise at the end of Chapter 16. And what I'd like to do is tomorrow do the same thing with 17. All right, then we're through the first 17 chapters, which means we have 3 chapters left, 18, 22, and 25. And for Chapter 18, which is on the entity framework, we might need a little bit more time on that. I don't know, but we're going to do a different kind of project as a class so you can see how we can get some code written for you. We'll do that next week. And I'm looking at different ways to go and port our stuff out where we can have basically put it out there for free and then link to it from the profiles. That'll be for 22. And then for 25, that'll be sometime in November, but I don't know when exactly. But that's going to be on Model View Controller. We're going to spend most of the rest of the semester then on that. All right, so I'm on page 567 in the book. One thing I was thinking about this morning as I was going through and redoing the exercise at the end of the chapter. This is not a bad book, but the problem is it's not a good book either. This is my opinion. You may or may not agree with it, which is fine. But what he does, the author does, is I think he does a pretty good job of explaining the concepts to you. I think he does. But when you actually have to do things, he does too much of do this, now do this, now do this. And he also has his own order in which he likes to have things done. And I'm not saying it's a good order or bad order. I don't know, maybe that's not for me to say. But in some ways, I don't think he has you think enough on your own. All right, and I wish he would do that, but he doesn't. So, in this chapter, we talk about the list view and the data pager. They are 2 different controls, but the data pager typically works with the list view. The list view, by default, doesn't have pagination, so you add a pager control. Okay? After you add the pager control, it works pretty much like the ones we saw before, where you can use numbers, or the word first, or whatever. All right? And I wasn't going to do it this way, but I am anyway, and that is, I'm going to show you when we get to the end of the chapter, okay, right now, this is what you're going to have in there. And maybe you'll be surprised, maybe you won't, but it's almost nothing. Literally, all that's going to be on for this chapter when I run this is the banner, the Halloween Superstore. That's literally. I mean, when we take a look here, and you look at when we look at the code, that's all that's in there. See that? It's basically nothing. All right. So I come in here and run this. And that's it. That's the run. Okay. After we go and add the stuff that we're going to add for it, I'm just going to show you that also because, like I said, I've already done it. Where's it? There's no C# code in this example. In fact, in none of them, basically, was there any C# code. And when we get up to this, you'll see when I run this, how it'll look different on the screen. We're going to basically set it up so that it comes in here and we tell it to grab stuff from the customers table. Okay? This is being done right now with a list view. We'll have to do a little bit of playing with it, for lack of better words. You may or may not be able to tell, but if you look at the titles that are up at the top, can you note? Hopefully you notice that last name and state and city are in white, but first name and phone number are kind of in a gray. That's just the way that the author did this with the CSS. But those 3, they're sortable. So I can sort by state, I can sort by city, I can sort by last name. Okay? So we'll do all that stuff. And we're going to do all of it by just using a list view control. Now we'll add the data pager, and this is what the author considers to be customization. A combination of using buttons with first and last on there, and then numbers. I don't know exactly what that means, but that's what they consider. So, fine. All right, so that's what we're going to build our way to. And you see there's a couple hundred lines in there. It's nothing terrible. It really isn't. And I hopefully will be able to get it done, take our time doing it, and get it done during class today. What I'm going to ask is that by the end of the period, if you have not done so already, that you give me your homework for Chapter 15, the one that we did last week. All right, not right now, but if you bring them up by the end of the period, okay, so I can copy them over to my listing so I can get those graded. So, again, I don't want to read to you. This chapter is on the list view and the data pager. The list view is a lot like the grid view, but by default, real simply, the list view allows you to do inserts. Okay, so you can see that's what the whole chapter's on. There's just basically about one program that they go through in here that goes through some stuff. All right. So, how to use the list view. And if we turn up to the next page here, this is an example of a list view and what it can look like. It's not a real big thing, but just so you see it. Now, notice it says a list view control that provides for updating a table. And notice one of the three properties, insert item position. All right. Hopefully you realize that the position right here for insert item position is last item at the bottom. You can put it in first item so it goes to the top, or you can have none. Again, the reason I'm bringing it up is more for you and for Brady in case you want to use that control, in the user interface that you're providing. All right. Now they do mention, it says it's very customizable. It's very similar to what we looked at with the grid view back in Chapter 14. Again, the main difference is this idea here that by default, it allows you an additional role for inserting information into a table. All right. These are the basic properties that you end up using. Okay. And then down below it, these are the basic elements. You may or may not have noticed this, but we've had these elements the last few chapters. All right. If you go in and you set up a predefined style, virtually all these things are going to be filled out for you. And if you set up no style, virtually none of these things are going to be filled out for you. All right, again, you'll see that as we get going. So when you want to define the layout for a list view control, you use these different templates. Okay? So what does that mean? I mean, what does that mean in the mainstream of things, etc.? Well, when you go in and you start working with this stuff, you're able to go in, the easiest here just to show you. So if I come in here, and this is what we're going to create, just so you see it. Okay, that right there, that's the list view control. Okay, and when you go for the list view control and you click on the smart tag, you can configure the data source, you can refresh the schema, etc. We're going to set all that kind of stuff up. And I can't do it now because I've already gone and set this stuff. But we can bring up this thing that you see in the book here on page 571, and that is the Configure List View dialog box. All right. And you'll notice here they've chosen blues. That's why you get the coloring. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. The one that we're going to do at the end of the chapter, we will use the default, which is no formatting. We'll format it ourselves. All right. But again, if you choose one of these, colorful, professional, or blue, not only is it going to change the color here, but it's going to set up a lot of different stuff like the alternating row style, etc., and a bunch of the other stuff. We don't want to do that. We want to do it ourselves. All right. Notice, too, that you can set this up in many different ways. If you choose grid, which is the default, again, it looks a lot like a grid view. All right. I haven't dealt much with the tiled or the bullet lists, etc. I haven't done much work with those. But those are the other possibilities that you have right there. All right. It's not recommended that, a lot of times when you start, you'll do no formatting. Okay? But if you do choose one of these, the author even says this on page 570, that this isn't really the recommended way to do it. The authors did that in case you're lazy or you've got some kind of one of these three patterns that everybody has accepted. You can use that. But the thing is, that's not the recommendation. In fact, the author even recommends that if you use one of those, you should pull out all the CSS that it provides for you and stick it in an external file. All right? I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. Now, there's going to be, when you do this, okay, there'll be an item template that's generated for this. And that item template that's going to be generated for this, it's going to depend, all right, on the columns in the data source. So in other words, whether you select everything or just some of the columns, the order in which you select them, what you bind it to, do you want editing, do you want, deleting, etc. But if you look at the example here, if we were to run this, what you'd see would be each one of these records and each one of the fields that are shown with a delete and with an edit button, and then at the bottom you'd have an insert. All right, I believe at least that's what the author is trying to show you. Now, what's going to be confusing? We're going to go through this example as a class. We will run it as a class. But the author has you automate some stuff, and when you automate it, there's going to be a bunch of stuff that's going to be added for you. And the first thing the author says is you don't need this, you don't need this, and you don't need this. You've got to be real careful when you remove the stuff that he tells you to remove. Because if you remove the wrong thing, it won't work. And it's very easy to remove a tag from one place when you're in another place. Why am I telling you that? Because that's what I did. All right? And it's just very common to do things like that. So, they show you here on page 573, the author says this is the layout template that was generated for the list view control that we saw earlier. It was configured basically using no formatting applied so that you're able to go in and concentrate on the layout. You don't have to worry about the coloring. You can always go back and add that later if you want. All right. Now, this template contains two different rows. All right. The first row defines the layout of the data that's displayed in the table. Okay. And then the second row defines the pager area. So in other words, this stuff right here is going to be your data, and in here is going to be the way you want your page set up. 1, 2, 3, first, last, etc. However you want it set up. All right. Now they also mention here, it says, notice when you do this, by default, this looks a little funky compared to some of the stuff we've done in the past. Notice how every single thing that you put in here says run at equal server. We haven't had that before. When you create a table, you might have run at equal server in your table tag, but you haven't had it in all of your individual tags. All right? It's not required, but it's added by default when you configure it, just in case, again, there's something special, some special attributes that you want to set with them. All right? So why do you do this? I mean, why the heck does it even matter? All right? You can get a lot of different looks and feels when you do this. In this chapter, the look and feel that the author asks you to do is very similar to the look and feel of a grid view, but it doesn't have to be. In other words, you can set this up in a lot of different ways and make it look a lot of different ways. And this is another one of these things that's really customizable. All right? So, next on 575, they talk about working with the item template. All right, it says the first thing you should notice here is that the template contains a single TR element right here. So in other words, you're basically setting everything up in the item template. You're showing how one row will look, and every row will look like that one row. Does that make sense? All right. And you'll notice here that you've got ASP button ID, okay? And what are these for? These are because every single one you want the ability to delete and edit. And then when you look here, you'll notice these are just labels. Now, hopefully everybody is okay with the fact, you all do understand the fact that right now, since they're all labels, by default, we're saying this is more read-only in the way that we're making it look. All right, because they're not text boxes or whatever. All right. Now, when you do this, not only is there going to be an item template there's going to be an alternating item template that gets done. So, that's the way that you end up, for lack of better words, doing the zebra striping, so that every other row looks a little bit different. As far as providing for sorting, which is 576 and 577, it's similar to what we did before. You've seen this kind of picture before, all right? But notice that when we do this, we have to set it up as literally, instead of having just our field names in there, we come in here and we make what's called an ASP link button. You know what those are. We have looked at them before. That's just, it's a button, but instead of looking like a button, it looks like a hyperlink. All right. And so we set that up. We say command equals sort, which means we want to sort on that field. And the argument is the name of the field you want to sort on. So if you look, we've got product ID name and what is it? We've got command argument of product ID, command argument of name, and command argument of category ID and name. So there's three ways we can sort. Just on the product ID, just on the name, or if we click on category, it'll sort on both category and name. All right. And again, this is the exact same thing that we're going to do, but the author, in the example that I showed you, when I showed you the finished product of the one we're going to do as a class, in just a bit, used CSS because he didn't like that coloring. So he made it where it was white in color if it's going to be a sortable link, and gray if it was not going to be a sortable link. And if you put your mouse and hovered over the sortable, it changed from white to black. Okay? And just like we've seen before, if it's multiple fields, you put them in there and just separate them with a comma. All right? All right, so that's all that stuff, and then we get into actually using the paging. All right? So to provide this, you use the data pager control. The easiest way to create this, you can select the enable paging, and it'll put it in there for you. But if you don't want to do that, okay, you can also bring in a pager control by itself. Okay? And when we do this, notice, there it is. There's the pager control. There's the fields. And notice that what's been chosen in here, type is button, show first page is true, etc. And if we set it up like this, or we can set it up like this. So what's the difference? All right. We say numeric pager field as opposed to next previous pager field. Okay, it's the only difference. And also notice that when you say this, you can put the page size in there too. That's how many records you want to show per page. I think we do that in the example. I don't remember if we did or not, to be honest with you. All right. So if you do want to customize paging, all right, that's when you use this data pager control. You may or may not agree, but this is, to the author, that's customized paging right there. So it's a combination of the next, previous, etc., and numbering. That's customizing. And the author says there, because it's a separate control, you don't have to place it inside of the list view. You can actually put it basically anywhere you want on the page. All right, but you do need to set the paged control ID if you're going to use one of these. Okay, that identifies, it's going to identify the list view control that you're working with, because you could conceivably on the same page have a multiple number of these. All right. The properties that you'll work with here are these. And notice here the type of button that you're going to use. All right, whether the first page button is displayed, the previous page button is displayed, the next page button is displayed, and the last page button is displayed. And notice by default, the only thing that's shown are the previous and the next. And these things are supposed to be set up that they wrap. So if you get to the end and you click to go forward, it's supposed to go back to the beginning. You get to the beginning and you click backwards, it's supposed to go to the end type of thing. So they're supposed to wrap. Here are the properties. All right. Button count. In other words, how many buttons maximum do you want to have displayed? All right. And button type, the type of buttons that you're going to use. And they show how you can set this one up on here. All right. Again, this is so similar to the stuff that we looked at in the last chapter. It really and truly is. All right. So the author says, okay, you've got all this stuff. Why should you use this as opposed to a grid view? And this slide that's here on page, or this thing on page 583 shows it. It would be virtually impossible to create this with a grid view. All right, what they've done here when you look is that says group item count equal 2. So that means that you want to have two records side by side. Now be real leery if you're going to do this, because if you've got, for instance, notice we've got just a short description, but if we were putting a long description in there and it was really long, it's going to look really unprofessional. All right, but the author is just trying to show you this is another way that you could show your data. All right, if you only had it in one column and you were doing this, it actually would probably only take up, what, maybe a third of the page or so, and it might not look that good. So the author is trying to show you this, especially if you're creating reports and the like, that this is just another thing that you can do if you want to do it. All right, this one I believe is an example of a tiled layout. So that's what they've done, is they've changed the type in there. All right, so let's take a look, and they show this on 584, 585, 586, 587, 88, and 89, okay? And this is a list application that uses the list view control, so I'm going to bring that one up. And first, let's just bring it up and run it, and then we'll go back and kind of decompose it or take a look at what's in there. So in this example, we're not, again, this is a select example, so we're not letting the user come in and add anything. All right, this is very similar to what we're going to create at the end of the chapter. All right, so it says you can see that the first column in the list view control contains the product name. Then the second column has got all of the, they all say the same thing: category, short, long, etc. Then the third column has the data. So again, they're showing you how you can take and use a control to customize the look and feel that you get when you run the application. All right. And they even mention, it says this type of layout would not be possible if you did it using the grid view control. All right, so we're displaying all the products in the product table. The list view is going to be bound to the SQL data source control. It's going to use item and alternating item templates to display every other row with a different background color. And it's going to have a data pager control to display 4 products on each page. All right, and as you notice, this one's got 3 because we're at the end, but every other one should have exactly 4. All right. And it's kind of nice too, because the way that it's set up, if you take a look in here, and if you look right here, for example, that's where the second column is. You'll notice as we move our way through that what's positioned there in that second column, its positioning does not change. It might get wider or narrower depending on the data, but its actual physical position does not change. That might not sound like a big thing, but it is, and you'll see that when we go through the example as a class, okay, in just a bit. So what they show in the textbook here then, starting on page 587, is they show you the default ASPX file. Now, the author selected a flow layout to do this. That was the way he was able to get multiple columns, All right? So just so you know that. All right. So when we take a look at what's actually in here and we look inside of here, all right, it says the first page of this listing shows the layout template for the list view control. There's 2 div elements in here, and both those divs were generated by default. So the good news is a lot of this is drag and drop, and things are going to be set for you. That said, you'll have to go in and do some customization if or as you're told to do so. All right. So the first div is used as a container for the item placeholder, and the second one contains the data pager control. So the first one's all the way down to here, and then the last one is for the data pager. It's in here. You can see how they've done some customization on it right there. So they show you this, and to me, one of the important things is as you go through and do this, you'll notice when you look in here, as an example right here, what are they doing? They're using Bootstrap, all right, to try to have, again, that consistent look and feel to this. It's funny, I always go through and I read these, and then I go back and reread them, and it's like tonight I'll go back and I'll reread chapter 17. But I thought, well, this is going to probably take about an hour and a half to go through, and then we'll have a break, and then we'll go through this, and then there'll still be about an hour, maybe 2 hours left in class. But we only have 4 pages left in the chapter. So we're going to get done, and we'll actually start on what we're working on. We may be done by 2 o'clock. All right, if we're done by 2 o'clock, the hope is that your groups will get together and get some work done. All right? It's going to be hard for your group to get together, but your group of 1 can get together. How's that? All right. Finally, starting on page 590, how to update list view data. It says to update list view data, you use edit item and insert item templates. So again, the key thing here is this. If you want to update them, all right, you use edit item and insert items. For the example that we're going to do, we don't want to do updating. But when we create the list view, those templates are going to be created for us automatically. Did you hear that? We're going to remove them. And if you don't watch what you're doing, like I said, and take your time, follow my lead, however you want to say it, you could have some problems getting the thing to run. All right, so worst case, do it more than once, I guess. Now, the author says that when you click a button, it'll do whatever the button says. So, again, I'm not going to read these to you. It should make sense to you when you click an edit button, what happens? All right? Notice when you're in edit mode, you'll have update and cancel. So when you're in edit mode and you make a change and you click update, it's going to write it back to the database. If you're in edit mode and you decide you don't want to make the change and you click cancel, it cancels whatever you were working on. All right? If you click delete, as it says, it'll delete the item from the data source. By default, unless you put in some code, all right, to make it not do so, it'll just remove it. All right, so again, a lot of times the easiest way to work with this stuff is to go in and first do an insert, add a new record, and then do a delete right away. Or in fact, do an insert and then update it, and then do a delete. So you can walk through all the operations to make sure that they work. But again, command name delete, command name edit. All right. So the author says, to help you understand how the edit item and insert item templates work, Figure 1612 presents these templates for the list view control that we worked with earlier. Okay. So what they're showing here is how you would use these with the example that we looked at before, this one. So if you wanted to add the ability to edit what was in here or to insert something new, you could do it. Now, I believe, and I don't know for sure, but I think one of the reasons the author didn't put that in there is because in this example, Does it make sense to you? If you're going to allow editing, if you're going to allow inserting and updating, you have to write the C# code. We talked about this before. Because if you're going to do an update and you're about to update a row, you want to check the affected rows, because if it's equal to 0, your update didn't work. If you try doing a delete, you have to check the affected rows. And if the affected rows equal 0, it didn't work. All right? If you try doing an insert and you get some kind of a problem, same kind of thing. All right? And the last thing that's really discussed in the chapter here, this is on the bottom of 592, says the list view control raises many of the same events as the data view control and the form view control. For example, it's got an item updating, it's got an item updated. The updating, again, which you would do for validation. The updated, which again you'd choose after it was done to make sure it worked or didn't work. All right, it says you'll typically use the before to provide data validation, all right, and the other to provide error handling code if the operation wasn't successful. So it's all stuff we talked about before. All right, so that was quick, down and dirty, but let's take a look again at what we're going to do in here. This is the exercise, the handout that I gave you. All right, everybody should have one. That's on 595 and 596. If you would please bring up, I'm going to just close out everything that I've got here that's running. In fact, I'll even, I don't know, does anybody have the flash drive? Okay. Thank you. I'll even use the one that's on the flash drive. I shouldn't do that because Brady will need it, and so will Tiffany. So I will grab the folder that says ASP.NET CH16 Starter and copy it out to the desktop. And I'm going to work with it just like you are. All right? So if you would please bring that one up. It's EX16 customer list. Bring that up, and then double click as always on the solution file to bring up the solution. And it's 1:17. We'll sneak a break in, but my guess is we'll still be done sometime around 2 o'clock. All right? And I'd like, again, to do the same thing tomorrow. Tomorrow is a little harder. It's on object data sources. So we'll talk about that. We'll do one of those problems. Okay? And then Wednesday and Thursday will both be this week. We will use them both as database days. My hope is that when she comes in here on Friday, that we've actually got something that you're going to be able to show her that's going to have data and the like in it. It's certainly not going to be finished. All right? And, a couple of you have even said that. Is it even going to be finished by the end of the semester? Probably not. We'll see. We'll give her what we can give her. How's that? All right. So, again, here's the default right now. And you'll notice, as I said, there's nothing in there. So the author says in step 1, open it, run it. You don't have to do that, but I will just so you see it. Again, all that's in there is the thing that says Halloween Superstore. That's what you'd expect, because right now there's nothing that's in the form section. There's nothing there. All right? I'm not going to lie to you either. I've got my cheat sheet here. So went back and did it. This is the third time I did it this morning. Oh, now that I've got that. We have these in the copier in the room. You're the only Evan I know, so with that last name. So if we run it, that's what we get. So that's step 1 of 12. All right, so let's just go in and start following the steps. And again, I'm not saying I would or would not have done it in the order the author is doing it. It works, and I guess that's the most important thing. So step 2 says, go in and add a list view control. So if you look up on the screen here, what we all want to do is we want to add a list view right here. Right there, right where the cursor is. So I'm going to go into my toolbox. I'm going to a view toolbox, go into my data controls, find a list view, and drag it out here. All right. Again, you don't have to do what I'm doing. I'm just doing it so everything shows on the screen. So there's my list view. All right, that's the first thing. Then, with that list view highlighted, or someplace you can highlight the whole thing, it doesn't matter, go into design view. And that's what we've added. Everybody cool with this so far? All right, so we want to click the smart tag that's over here. And notice we don't have much. Choose data source. Well, there aren't any, so we want to choose a new one. If you want, this is where you can do any naming you want. So if you want to call this SQL whatever, you can. Choose SQL database. I'm just going to leave it as data source 1. We only have one in here. It'll be fine. I'm going to click OK. Then it says, what connection string do you want? Well, there's only one, and it's the Halloween connection. All right. So I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to click Next. I shouldn't be going too fast. Oh, it doesn't like that schema thing. I'm going to click OK. Now, how did we get around this before? I think we have to add a new connection. So if you get the same thing in here, then just come in here and do this. If you get the error, just right mouse click on here, choose Add Connection, all right, and reconnect to the database. All right. Click OK, and you should have a second connection. All right. What? Yes, I will. Yeah, I think this is the one we just added, was this one. All right. So, right mouse click where it says Data Connection. Choose Add Connection. This is what's going to come up. We want to click the Browse button. We want to browse to our project. We want to be at our project, which is right here. All right. In fact, I'm in the wrong place. So I want to browse to the project. So let's see. Mine's on my desktop. Hope I brought the right project up, but we'll find out. Mine's at my desktop, Chapter 16. The EX16 customer list, app data, and the Halloween.mdf. All right, that should fill this in. You can test it if you want. All right, mine still doesn't work. Hopefully when you test yours, it works. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to very quickly do this. I'm going to kill this project because I think I opened the wrong one. All right, so I'm going to open the right one right now. So right here. There, here, all right. So I'm going to, just like I told you to do, I'm going to come in here, right mouse click, choose Add Connection, do the same stuff we just did, Halloween database. I'll test it. You better work. Click OK. Yes, I do want to update it. That should fix it then. All right. Now I want to do my View Toolbox. In my data, I want to come in and I want to drag in, as I just told you, I want to come in here and drag in. So View Toolbox, and I want to come in, and drag in a list view. All right, you may already be ahead of me and you may have done this already, which is great. Now the list view right now is not hooked up to anything. I've got to do that. So with the list view highlighted, I'm going to go into Design View and I'm going to click the Smart tag, choose Data Source. I'm going to choose New Data Source, SQL Database, OK. Connection string, I think I want the Halloween.mdf. Next, save it as connection string. You've seen all this stuff. We've done it before. All right, that should get us to here. They ask us to go to the customers table. And under the customers table, again, I'm taking this right out of step 2. We want last name, followed by first name, followed by state, followed by city, followed by phone number. So we want it in that order as it's shown on the screen here, down in the window down below. That's the order the author asks you to do it in. And we want to do an order by, and we want to order it by last name. So this is what the entire query should look like there. That's all taken from step 2. Forgot city? You are correct. All right. And I want to do it in the right order, so I'm going to remove this. And what is it? It's last name, first name, state, city, phone number. Is that everything? I think that's correct. All right. So remember, you can always go to next and test it. This should work when you test it. We're not doing anything but a select anyway, so it really should work. All right. So we've gone through step 1. We've now gone through step 2. All right. And I can click finish. Now, please look up on the screen here. We want to keep this up here. Everybody hear that? We want to keep this up here. So we want to click where it says Configure List View, right there. That brings up that Configure List View dialog box that was shown in the chapter right near the beginning, way back on page, I don't know, 571 in the book. All right. Now, with this chosen, it says make sure that grid layout is selected. That should be the default right here. It should be. Don't select the style, so we want no formatting. Enable paging. And select the numeric pager item from the drop-down list when it becomes available. So does everybody see that? So make sure yours says grid. Make sure you've got no formatting. Click where it says enable paging. Then this down arrow, click on that and choose numeric pager. All right, that's everything in step 3. Any problems so far? All right, click OK. Now look, this is what I want you to see, is now go back into your source mode. And you'll notice there literally is a boatload of stuff that was put in there for you. See that? We're going to get rid of a bunch of this stuff now because it's set up currently so that it'll handle anything. So in other words, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to run what we've got. Again, you don't have to do this. But notice right now, and it'll look a lot better in just a couple minutes. All right, we'll fix it up. All right, but we're going to do a bunch of work to this. And you'll notice if we go here, that works. And believe it or not, we've got most of this done already. Now it's a matter of getting rid of the stuff we don't want. Okay, and then we'll have to do some formatting after we get done with that. So I'm stopping my run here. So I'm going to go right almost to the top of this. So I'm right by my form here. And on step 4, the author says switch to source view, which I've done. We want everything that, we'll start with alternating template. So notice there's alternating item template. I want to find the beginning of it and the end of it. So I want to highlight everything under alternating item template. Okay? And we don't want it. So after it's all highlighted, hit the delete key. Now that one's gone. All right. The next thing that we want to do is we want to do the same thing with the edit item template. So I'm going to highlight all of that from the beginning to the end of my edit item template. And I'm going to delete that. All right. So those two are both gone. Next, I want to find the insert item template. That's down a little further. As you can see, we keep the empty one. So going down to insert item template. highlight all that and hit delete. Now that's gone. And then finally, we want the selected item template, which again is down further. It's under the layout. All right. Now, it's not mandatory that you do this, but now I've got some white space in here, so I'm going to clean it up a little bit. Again, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. I'm going to put a little bit of white space in here, but just not a whole lot. So after the item template, I will add a line here. And I don't need one here. All right. Now, I always go in, I'm not going to do that with you right now, but I typically put each one of these things on their own line. It would just kind of take too much time to do that right now. So we've now done step 1, we've done step 2, we've done step 3, we've done step 4. Okay? So, good time to do a save all, and now you can run, which is what they ask you to do in step 5. And if you say it looks a lot like it did before when you ran it just a couple minutes ago, and it does because we've added no styling via Bootstrap, which is what we're going to do in just a couple minutes. But what you should notice is it works, so I can click last and first and jump back and forth. I can click on any of the numbers and jump back and forth. Okay? So that's the first 5 steps. Any question on any of those first 5 steps? All right, because we're only at 1:30, so we may finish this almost by 2 o'clock. You want to take a break? Okay, Amin wants a break, so we're going to take a break now.